Hey, it's Bryan.
Hey, it's Barry.
Nate here.
And welcome to the Collecti-Bros podcast.
Sounds so unenthused.
I just gotta keep everyone on their toes in the intro, you know.
Man.
New year, new energy.
So on today's first Is It Worth It of 2024, we are playing Gunstar Super Heroes for the GameBoy Advance. But before we get into it, let me invite y'all to follow us on social media. We are at Collecti-Bros Pod on all platforms, primarily on the TikTok. But check us out. Join the Discord. The link's in the episode description. If you're new here, Is It Worth It? Let's go over that. It's our primary series here on the Collecti-Bros podcast. We look at a game. We go over 5 contributing factors of the game: graphics, story, sound/music, gameplay, collectibility, to answer the overall question, is it worth it? As in your time, energy, money, all that. All right, some fun facts about the game. Gunstar Super Heroes is the quotations sequel 12 years in the making to 1993 classic beloved game Gunstar Heroes. The reason why I say sequel in quotations is if you've played the first game, you're going to tread a lot of familiar ground, right? A lot of the levels are the same. They pull a Star Wars and the story is almost identical. It has a lot of similarities in the first one, but it also has enough to change to separate itself into a different game. This is also interesting because Treasure was kind of renowned for not doing sequels at the time. And this game's 12 years in the making for a completely different system. They went all out. It was pretty nice. Since we were worldwide, 16 countries listening to our podcast, our European listeners might be very confused of what we're talking about Gunstar Super Heroes, because the game is actually called Gunstar Future Heroes in Europe. I actually like that name a little better, especially if it truly is a sequel. I think it kind of fits the game a little bit more. Again, this game is developed by Treasure. They're developers of the original game. For people in the retro gaming community, y'all probably know Treasure from the 16-bit era. They're beloved and they have so many banger after banger titles. They're kind of pioneers in the action genre, right? You might know them from Guardian Heroes, Mischief Makers, Ikaruga, Radiant Silvergun. They're known for just having innovative, different games that kind of push the boundaries of the action platform back then.
Quality.
Right. OneUp.com, I think, describes Treasure perfectly. Their key thematic elements, which is creativity, weirdness, and a tendency towards completely absurd levels of action. And I really do think that's the best way to summarize the developer. Every single one of their games stands out, and honestly, this game is no exception. The game was published by Sega and was released exclusively for the Game Boy Advance in October 2005 in Japan. North America and Europe got this game in November 2005. And still to this day, the only way to play this game is on the Game Boy Advance, or if you sail with high seas. Alright, so let's jump into the story, which I'm sure this is going to be meaty. You know me, I pick games that don't have great stories. This game takes, and I quote, many years later after the first game. Just to kind of summarize the first game, it's kind of like Star Wars. There's an evil empire. They're building this super weapon, and you've got to stop them. Okay, there you go. So guess what happens in this, quote, sequel? The empire is again building the same weapon. And, you've got to stop them again. It's pretty much, Star Wars building 2 Death Stars and all that. So if you're into that, I guess you'll be into the story of this game.
Yeah, they're going after these crystals to charge a super weapon, and they're literally like, okay, that didn't work the first time around, so let's go ahead and try to grab these crystals and do it again. That's the premise of this game.
Right, so you do play as different characters. They're, clearly obvious nods to the original protagonist. They're even named Red and Blue yet again. you're clearing the same amount of stages. There's different moons or the actual stages that divide up just like the original game. There's really not a lot to cover here on the story. There is one thing that the Gunstar Super Heroes does better, in my opinion, than the original release. It's that you actually get cutscenes between with characters speaking with dialogue. If you play on the harder difficulties, it actually changes the story slightly. It kind of goes into the backstory of characters and how they're connected even more. And even if you play it on hard, there's voiced dialogue in the GameBoy Advance, which is always a pretty nice touch. But yeah, truthfully, no one's here for the story, man. I appreciate how they tried to do a little more, especially 12 years down the line. Like, they had the technology to do so. But at the end of the day, you're here to play a fun action game, shoot 'em up. That's where you're at. No one's here for the story. I do appreciate that they tried to expand and add more to it, but at the end of the day, that's not why we're here.
I have questions with the story, though. So we have, like, your first two original characters in the main game are, like, gone.
Yeah.
And you fight literally the same bosses. Like, they're all... that exploded in the end of the first one, mind you. And then they're all back. So we should have just brought all the boys back. It's kind of weird to be like, oh, well, that was a long time ago. But it's like, yeah, but all these dudes are still alive. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, and even, the main antagonist is literally the same person. It's not like someone else taking up the mantle. There's a character, spoiler alert, that dies in the original, but they're magically back in this one. And they literally die the exact same way. And there's so many parallels of Star Wars where even he's bad and then he flips to good. It's not my favorite part of this game. I'll just be blunt about that. Again, I don't think it's detrimental or anything. No, I don't know anybody who's like, oh, the Gunstar Heroes lore is fascinating. But it is. I will give them a positive mark for trying to improve and trying to tell the story in a different way, a more modern way for a more modern console than they were on the Genesis. And then even having the different difficulties, adding more to the story or adding different paths to the story, that does help with the replayability of it slightly, because it is a pretty short game, let's be honest.
Yeah, it's a good effort overall. I'm not going to sit there and knock them for it. Like, they didn't have to do all that, so it clearly shows that they actually did put a little bit of thought into it, even though the story is pretty, basic, but...
Yeah, end of the day, it's a handheld run-and-gun game, so the fact that we're getting much of anything here, I'm not going to pull at strings and criticize them too hard, but it is not a selling point of this game at all, to be fair about that. And in my opinion, the standout of this game, let's move on to the graphics. I'm going to go ahead and just say it right off the bat. This game is very pretty, and there is a ton going on. I think this game punches so high above its weight. I mean, if you look at the first game at all, and again, I'm trying to be fair and compare this on its own metrics, but it's a sequel, so we're going to compare it against the first game. It's night and day graphically compared to the first game. Immediately you notice the camera is zoomed in much more, probably because it's a portable device. But even the main characters' sprite work, it's so much more detailed. They're expressive. When you hold down the trigger, they'll kind of grimace. You can see facial expressions, the lighting, the explosives. Oh, and I hope you enjoy Mode 7, because this game is just full of Mode 7, which I'm all about on the Game Boy Advance. I think it's cool every time I see it, even now.
What's Mode 7?
It's a pseudo 3D effect with the spinning and the water. Anytime you see that pseudo 3D effect, it's Mode 7. So Super Nintendo is where they first started doing it. Obviously, Game Boy Advance is kind of just a beefed up Super Nintendo. But the Mode 7 in this game, it's pretty wild at times. And there's a million things going on the screen. I think we only had slowdown a little bit when that was happening as well. And that might have been, we were playing with the Retron 5, so that might have been emulation. But it's a beautiful game on a handheld device. And for an action game where there's so much going on, for the most part, there's times where you do get lost just because there's so much explosions. But everything's detailed very, very well. There is a handful of times when you're fighting the bosses where there's just so many explosions going on, you'll get lost. But for the most part, you can tell what everything's supposed to be. Nothing's really a mystery. They did a great job animating. The graphic style is completely different than the original. The original was much more muddy and kind of, I don't want to say not detailed, but I mean, it was a Genesis, and it was the Treasure's first time working on a Genesis.
Their first game, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But this one has a more of anime style graphics, and it kind of fits the, Sega's Game Boy Advance games at the time. If you look at Sonic Advance, it has that anime style to it, and it looks great. I mean, it's very fitting for this game, I think. Did you guys have any standouts for the graphics as far as like bosses or levels or?
Standouts for me, I thought I was most impressed with some of the background pixel artwork. Some of the backgrounds could have been like the same, like I feel like I see it a lot of times in 2D side scrollers if it's just like the same bricks, the same walls, and they're like, oh, here's some sky with the cloud. I remember one of the transition, I can't remember which stage it was, but it was one of the transition scenes when you were in the space with the little like spaceship, and you had to rotate. You're rotating the ship, but the entire background is rotating instead of the ship to give it a different effect, which I thought was really cool in terms of animation. But there was a transition where you could see like a space station or something in the background, and it just had really gorgeous looking pixel art with the colors because it was like purples and blues. So it felt very like Miami Vice, if that's a weird way to say it. I don't know why. In like color, it was very neon.
Yeah.
It just reminded me of like some of the old like 80s style colorings of things, which I thought was a super cool touch.
Yeah, especially like in outer space. I think it stands out the most in space. But it's apples and oranges when you compare this to the first game. The first one, it's not an ugly game, but I don't think it holds up very well as far as the looks department. But this one, you can tell they did not, phone it in. Like you're saying, I didn't notice any repeat textures, even on different grass stages. It wasn't like, oh, there's the same patch. They really took their time to animate it. Yeah, some of the enemies are very similar, but there's a lot of variety, not just we'll get into it later with the level design, but the actual graphics themselves. It's a labor of love too. And previously mentioned, this is almost like a retelling in a weird way. There's a lot of very similar stages where if you've played the original, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I recognize this part. Even like climbing a certain section, you're like, yeah, I remember this. Or fighting certain bosses, they look different enough where it's like, if you put both pixel arts side by side, you'd be like, oh, this one's definitely from Gunstar Super Heroes and not the original. And the pseudo 3D still looks amazing. It still looks cool. I'm a sucker for that every single time. Seeing the bosses transform and morph, like the 7-stage boss, he's still in here. I think he only had 3 or 4 stages on easy for us. But the animation's great too, even like sliding around, jumping, kicking, all the different combat, like all the animation's so smooth. It's just a really smooth, fast-paced running gun game, and it's cool to have it on a portable console.
The one thing I did appreciate was, before you go real quick, the one thing I do really appreciate a lot is each stage doesn't feel replicated.
Yeah.
Because it was, Earth and 5 Moons?
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like each one had enough difference. Like, there was the stage with the weird little town with the basically Minish in it.
Yeah.
And then that one looked completely different. And then the next stage with, like, the helicopter, which I almost just got stuck in that stage. Apparently, I didn't know you could do that. Stuck between the building and a wall.
Oh yeah, the bounce on the sick.
Yeah, and then we get to the board game stage and it's a casino, which is kind of like cool thematically. But then each tiny stage inside of that is designed very differently. Like the gold dragon with the water.
Yeah,
is very different than the one with the little tiny little green man. Put them in my cup. Like, all of them were different. And then, it even included that one with the face that was floating in the background that had that 3D effect. And then you swap over to, what was his name? Smash? Colonel Smash.
Oh, M. Bison.
Yeah, where, like, his was very, like, ornate and, like, I'm a rich man and I have, like, fancy paintings and stuff in my room. It was very lavish. So I think it was really cool in terms of art direction in each of the stages that they did feel very different. And I didn't feel like I was just repeating the same thing over and over. Because you can feel... that's the thing I tend to feel like I have a problem with, is I feel like 2D side scrollers a lot of the times it's just the same thing over and over and over. And it's like hard to put any type of variety in a level design when you're just running and gunning. But I think they did a really good job in design on this one. And it was really clearly executed really well.
Yeah, I agree. You can tell it's a labor of love, and especially it's cool for them to come back to the first game they ever made And yeah, even if it is sort of a retelling, like they could have phoned it in, and they didn't. It's a beautiful game. Even on, we played it on Restaurant 5 on a full screen, and I was trying to like change the aspect ratio to shrink it down to 4:3. And I was like, you know what, this still looks great, so I'm just going to leave it alone.
I'm pretty sure it was 4:3.
Yeah. It's just hard to tell on a big screen.
Because, it's wider than taller,
Right.
and it was wider than taller. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was 4:3.
Yeah. And it looked great. Like, I was really concerned initially, but it's beautiful. I can't even imagine what it looks like on a GameBoy Advance. It probably looks incredible on a SP.
Yeah, I don't have enough good things to say about it, honestly. It's one of those games, if you could just watch, honestly, and you're like, man, it's so pretty. It's one of those games also where if you step out of the room for a minute and you come back 5 minutes later, it looks like you're almost playing a completely different game because of the variety. But what ties it all together is kind of the art style. It still looks like the same game. It's just, there is so much variety. Like, I can't praise that enough. And especially for a short game, you want that. You want to feel like you're coming back to something kind of different every time you're playing it. So, like, truly, like, commendable effort here. I adore the original one. This one looks a million times better than the original one. Like, it's night and day, like you said, man. And can't say enough good things about it. From as far as like the simple look of it, I think they like it's far more detailed, clearly, and the little details go a long way in kind of putting you in the driver's seat. And it's funny because the game's so intense, where it's just throwing 100 enemies at you, and there's shit blowing up on the screen, and you have to change certain weapons to fight certain enemies, and you can still kind of notice little things as you're going through it, like, oh wow, that little explosion effect's really cool, how it kind of like follows you and smokes out, and then there's guys in the background almost like watching your progress. Like, I like the little quiet moments in this game too, like if you're going through a stage and the bosses are kind of just watching you mow down their minions on a screen, but it's almost like a border for the screen you're playing on, and then they'll like slowly send out a boss after you, like the first game. So it's phenomenal, like design as far as art direction, graphics, like high marks, no doubt.
Yeah, there's all sorts of like interesting effects too. Like, I remember we were going through space, and it was supposed to be kind of like a heat wave or smoke, and it was altering the screen. There's just the little things that it does that it looks really cool, and to have it on a Game Boy Advance again, it's pretty remarkable. I will say there was a couple times when I wasn't the one playing and I was watching the Mode 7 stuff. Like, I didn't get dizzy, but I wasn't like, oh, I could keep staring at this and be completely fine. I'd look at my phone for a minute or something. It was the one that you were playing, Nate, when you're standing on the plane and you're spinning the plane around in a circle. I'd look at my phone for a minute on that one. I don't know why. Maybe it's because there was like
It's the horizon line.
Yeah,
it's the horizon line, because there was another section and it was doing the same thing, and I was like, this isn't as bad.
Yep. I think it's true.
So, games come with like the epileptic seizure warnings. This one totally needs like a motion sickness warning. If you have motion sickness, like, make sure you got some barf bags with you.
Yeah, Nate had that great. If you stare in the middle of the screen, it's not so bad.
It didn't work.
No,
and I was
it made it
I don't
worse.
have motion sickness. I'm just bullshit.
Yeah, you did.
Usually it doesn't bother me, but it did get me for a little bit on that stage. And I didn't notice it when I was playing, but when I was watching, I don't know, it did get me a little bit, but still a cool effect to have on the GBA. All right, let's move into the meat and potatoes. And in my opinion, the biggest difference from this game and the first game, the gameplay. Okay, so let's just get the negativity out of the room. And the first glaring thing, if you've played the original, that you're going to notice, right? And it's, if the first thing you Google this game, it's the first thing you're going to see, is the omissions from the original game. So, Nate, if you could speak to it, our first experience playing Gunstar Heroes, the original one, and how awesome it was playing co-op.
Absolutely magical. Like, literally a moment I remember playing games, like, I'll always have. It's like literally my most fun memories. Because I actually came in this game like super late, which is kind of surprising as a Sega fan, but we were playing on a 360, and it's like an easy achievement game. We'll just run through this really quick. Had a blast. And part of the reason why I had a blast was you could almost like create best way to describe it is you could like create your own gun. Like, you could pick up different guns and you like combine the powers with them. It was pretty awesome, and it made the game stand out to me because played many other running games, Metal Slugs, like whatever, This one had a special little hook where it's, oh wow, I can combine these weapons and I can have a heat-seeking missile launcher, and it was really a unique thing. I was like, I will always remember this game. This one does not.
Not only that, I remember playing it with you in co-op, and just having the time of our damn lives, dude. And like the fact that you could even like pick up your co-op partner and throw them as like a baseball and knock enemies down their back. I think the co-op added so much to the original game. And that's the first thing you're going to notice, that there's no co-op option. Not even linking Game Boy Advances together. It's just not available for this game. There is no co-op. And then, yeah, the thing you mentioned, the combining weapons, that's what made Gunstar Heroes different than Contra, made it different than Metal Slug, was the fact that there's literally, 14 different combinations you can do and have 14 different guns. This one has 3. And yeah, it's, they do a little bit of variety by picking what character you select. They're going to have a different gun. But that's the thing that, in my opinion, made Gunstar Heroes so special and so unique, because it's a fun game single player, but that 2-player element is literally what, it's like playing Contra by yourself versus with a friend. Like, which one are you going to have more fun with? Clearly, you're going to have more fun with a friend. But they took it away.
Bro. They took the throw away from us, too. And that was just like, added so much like chaos and like cartooniness to it that was like really fun. And they added a melee button, but not being able to chuck dudes, and not in co-op with my combined rifle, is painful. However, this is still a really good game. I don't want to knock it, but
yeah,
it's a glaring omission. Like it's an interesting design choice, to be 100% honest.
I'm curious though, because like Barry, this isn't your type of game either. But did you feel like that would have been extra in this game, or you think it was necessary at all?
So as someone who's never played Gunstar Heroes, I'm not going to talk about Gunstar Heroes because this is about Gunstar Super Heroes. So here's from my perspective. I thought it was fine. My problems with... We're in gameplay. My brain's cooked. My problem mostly was with the jumping. I think I didn't have a problem with having 3 options. I felt like the options were enough variety. Each of those 3 weapon options, I got a super linked to them. So it wasn't... You have a super attack that you have to build up a gauge with, and once you kill enemies, it adds to that gauge. But it's not an overall gauge for all 3. Each one gets their own. Mm-hmm. So I thought, A, I already get 3 guns, and then B, I get 3 guns that I can rotate and then build up each super, and then I have 3 super abilities at any point in time. So I didn't feel like I needed to combine weapons in any ways because each one served their purpose for different moments. Like, I liked the green one when I needed the green one, and then there were moments where the laser one wasn't helping me and I wanted the one that I could just spray people with. Like, I didn't feel like I needed to combine them in any way, and I was fine. The cycling... There's a lot of things that this game could have done better with more buttons, but that's just the platform that it was on. It didn't have an X and a Y. As far as the jumping goes, I don't like it when games put, especially in this kind, the jump and the attack right next to each other. Because, like, bro, I only got one thumb. If I want to jump and attack at the same time, like, I can't. And a lot of this game requires you to really hold the attack button to do anything. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to hold the attack button and jump. So I basically had to try and play this game crab clawed, which, like, crab claw, like, controller sucks. Like, anybody who plays like that knows. Armored Core people are the worst about it because their whole playing the controller crab claw upside down is absolutely wild.
It's madness.
Yeah, I don't miss it. So, like, I don't like it when games make me feel like I need to crab claw a controller. I wish it, and then they couldn't make the jump on the D-pad because they also made it to where you could aim the gun, like, diagonally and up. So, like, how are you supposed to aim the gun up if you use the up as a jump? So it just, like, it wasn't intuitive, and so I disliked the controls the most, and there wasn't really much you could do with it, other than I wish they would have swapped the jump with the R.
Yeah, that would have been helpful.
Because the R bumper, what did it do other than
it's like your your aim lock.
The aim lock that I never used?
Right.
Okay. So I really wish they would have swapped it, because then I could have my, I could keep shooting and then use my finger up on the trigger to jump. And if I wanted to use my super ability, I wasn't going to be firing anymore. So I could swap it over to the A and hit the A button for my super ability. So in the day and age of where button mapping isn't a thing, like, you can hope. So, the best you can do is crab claw this game. But I didn't feel like the guns were lacking in any way. They had enough variety. When you played red, there was only one gun that was different than when you played blue. Mm-hmm. I personally like red's other gun the best. I felt like it had more differences than the green one. It's really dumb because red has 2 red guns.
Yeah.
Blue's main gun is like a little laser shooter, but it doesn't do the same thing the green laser shooter does. It just kind of shoots a little laser. The other one will like bounce off stuff and like seek targets.
Seeking, yeah.
But red's you could just hold it and it was basically like a flamethrower.
Yeah.
So I liked that one better. And then the other 2 were the exact same for both characters. So I don't know if there would have been a difference if there was some more weapon variety between the 2 characters, but I also am okay with both of them having a different primary weapon and then still having the same 2 available. But I mean, overall, like I didn't feel like I was missing anything other than controls that made sense.
Yeah.
So, but I just, if this game had came out on, the Genesis has 3 buttons, sometimes 6 right there. So you probably had a little bit more variety in terms of controls in a Game Boy Advance. Maybe if this game came out sometime newer, like if they made a new Gunstar Heroes for the Switch, there could be so many cool things they could do with it because we have so many more buttons to pick.
Oh, yeah.
Just my biggest gripes with this game, outside of the fact is like I don't like side-scrollers gameplay anyways. Like I just can't.
Whatever, Clutchy McClutcherson.
Dude, no. Well, that's because I was able to sit there and like, wait. I don't hate them. We talked about it when we were playing. I don't hate them. It's just I have a better time processing what's happening when I can watch somebody else play it.
Yeah.
But when I'm playing it, like I can't. There's so much going on. I can't pay attention and everything. And Nate said maybe it's a depth thing, and I think it is. It's really stupid, but.
Doesn't help that this game has like so much going on, and like,
It's-
the background, the foreground,
And
all around you.
And that's a big reason why I don't like shmups either, is like everything just feels like it's on a 2-dimensional piece of paper and there's too much for me to keep track of in all the space. And it's dumb because like I was like, oh, I play first-person shooters all day and I'm like fine with finding, enemies far off the size of like 2 pixels and paying attention, but I don't know. I told him, I said, this is my streamer game. I'd rather watch somebody play it than like actually play it myself.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like I was missing anything mechanically in how it was set up, just with controls.
I'll say honestly, it felt more balanced than, not comparing, but like there's definitely a design choice to keep it at 3. And I feel like personally, I used more guns playing this one than the first game because I was limited, but like Barry said, I made more strategic decisions. Like, okay, I'm going to use the laser here. The first one was as soon as I got the combo one, I'm riding and dying with that boy. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's better to get it. Like, honestly, less is more, and I can respect that in a lot of ways. Of like forcing you to pick what they have in front of you, it makes it a little more strategic instead of like,
Yeah.
I got what I want. I'm going to go cheese dog. You know what I mean?
I mean, there's a difference
better
between this,
gameplay, right?
especially
Yeah.
in this like era where there is limited capability of controls. If you go back older, like there's some games that you can only do like 1 or 2 things, and you have to do those 1 or 2 things like for the whole game, and it gets stale.
Mm-hmm.
Like and that's why I just can't go back and play some old games anymore because like the gameplay is so stale. So something like this, like Nate said, limiting you to 3 things that do 3 different things, and then presenting you with enemies or bosses or problems while you're playing that can only really utilize one of them, and you need to figure it out. It makes it more engaging to play. So we'll sit there and be like, oh, what if you try this, or what if you try this, or this is better for this enemy, or the one we had the problem was with what was his name? Orange on the plane.
Yeah.
Because like we were melting people with the heat-seeking laser, but the problem is the plane is blocking all of the laser, so like you can't use it. It's useless.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, we were like, okay, our strategy isn't working. We need to switch. And in a game where you only have 1 weapon available, it's like, okay, I guess you're jumping and using the 1 weapon. Like there's not more thought put into, okay, what are my tools? How am I going to use them? What kind of puzzles did these people try to set up for me to figure it out? I mean, there's obvious, Bryan said there's some notorious cheesy moments in this game, which is true.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of availability for the developers are asking the players to solve problems. And I think that takes it a step further than a lot of 2D side-scrollers that I've played. Is there's just, you shoot, you jump platform, you shoot enemy, you jump platform. That's boring. So I appreciate the limited capacity and things like this. Like, if I'm given a limited capacity, make the gameplay more interesting, then I like that combination better. I just don't have the processing brain power to do it at the same time while trying to crab claw
Yeah, I honestly
So-
agree 100% with what both you guys said. In my opinion, it's an unfair criticism of this game to be like, oh, they don't have the weapon combinations. Yeah, if you're a fan of the original, it's definitely an omission, but I think Nate, you said it, hit it on the head. I found myself switching weapon types and trying to find one that would work in certain scenarios way more than I ever did in the original
Way
game.
more rewarding gameplay. No doubt.
It is. Once you figure it out, it's kind of like a
cool
puzzle
thing,
game.
I don't want to make it sound like every weapon can hurt. Like, there's certain things I won't do as well on them, but like you could technically beat the game with every gun. Like, it's not forcing you to use that one. So I mean, like we kind of had different strategies for different times, and we were playing it, passing the controller around, which is also cool. That just shows you how much like flexibility in gameplay you have by actually limiting how many guns you have, which is an interesting like approach to game design.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I will say I do miss co-op. I think this would have been fun with co-op.
Co-op would have been amazing. No
Yeah,
doubt.
that's the only thing I really knew about Gunstar Heroes is like people applaud it for being one of the coolest like couch co-op games. And so when you first said we wanted to play this game, I was like, oh, it's on an advance. Like they've got link cable capability and wireless or whatever. And I looked it up and it was single player. I was like, there's red and blue. You can't play both. Like that's kind of okay or whatever. So that was honestly the most disappointing of like picking this game up to play it was, I think if there is any comparison, like Gunstar Heroes is known for the couch co-op like funness, and that's what people really enjoy about it. And to take that away in the second one is kind of disheartening, I would say.
Yeah,
Especially someone who's never played it. I'm like, that's what I heard about it. And I was like, oh, this will be cool, like for us to play together. Nah, we can't even get 2 copies.
Yep. And that's the thing, like you were saying, what sets Gunstar Heroes apart from other run and gun games is the weapon combinations and like the added co-op element. To have both of those out of this game and it still feels like Gunstar Heroes and it's still a pretty goddamn fun game. It's interesting. I feel like this game takes a bunch of unnecessary criticism. The co-op one I do understand, but yeah, it just added gameplay and more depth, quite frankly, when you don't have just the cheese. Like literally, like Nate said, you'd get the heat-seeking missiles and you could just destroy everything in the first game, start to finish. The only time you'd have to like think about anything is if you accidentally dropped one of the guns or if you died and lost your weapon. This one has a lot more variety. I think, Nate, you did hit it on the head by saying less is more. And then the added the super meter, like that was a nice addition too, and that kind of replaces some of the weapons. It wasn't in the original, and then for some of the bosses, it was so helpful in this game, clearing out the screen with like the green lasers had like the spiral that would heat seek and just keep knocking them.
It's like a big old caterpillar. It's like on your screen.
Yeah. I thought those were a blast. Every single one of them was fun to use, and it was like, all right, I'm going to drop the one with like the fireball was almost like a nuke. Those were a blast, man. Even just like mowing down fodder enemies, it was always fun just to see the big explosion or see the spiral smoke everybody. It was a lot of fun. It was unique. To say this, I think it stands enough alone. I know it's going to sound hypocritical, so all I've been doing is comparing it to the original, but it stands enough merit on its own where they've made enough changes. They've subtracted things that kind of, I don't want to say were unnecessary, but it's weird because it is the DNA of Gunstar Heroes, and now it's gone, but this still feels like Gunstar Heroes in the best way possible. Even Melee's expanded. Like, it's not just a throw like in the original game. This one, you could like Hadouken, you could slide kick. The melee was actually really fun once you got the combos going.
I mean, from what I understand, the negative criticisms about this game being bad are few and far between because everywhere I see people really enjoy this game and it's reviewed high. So, like, don't make it seem like people hate this game because they don't.
It's just a loud minority, I feel like.
It is. Yeah, because you were like, oh, people don't like this game because XYZ. And I'm like, everything I'm seeing says, like, people really like this game.
Yeah, it did review extremely well.
Yeah.
I think it is a more modern...
I'll put that out. I'll slide that little card on the table just to be like, hey, if you don't know about this game and you're playing it for the first time like me, people overall really enjoyed this game.
Yeah, and I can definitely see why. It's a blast. Like, I think it's one of the smoothest running guns out there. I mean, that's the thing. It's closer to akin to Metal Slug than it is Contra as far as the movement and the variety and the enemy design.
Even the look.
Yeah, it stands on its own for sure. I think it's a great run and gun game, quite frankly. And to have it portable, it just adds to it, in my opinion. let's start with the sound and the music. So the composer is actually the same composer, I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, Norio Hanzawa. That's pretty good. Primarily worked with Konami and Treasure, and he joined Konami under their infamous/famous Konami Award Kahula Club, which is the moniker of the Playback Hanzawa. Basically, it was, Konami had like a dream team of composers and developers, and he was a part of that. Some games that he worked on that you guys might realize. I'm going to go up.
Yeah, go up. No, go up. He's saying Hawanza, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? It's Hanzawa.
No,
Hanzawa, bro.
My Japanese
that
is
hard.
No,
I was like, Hawanza, where are we? What is this? Hanukkah and Kwanzaa together? Anyways, I'm sorry.
You're good.
I mean, what are you saying?
Look here.
It's fine.
I'm a man enough to admit my strengths and weaknesses, and I know Japanese is one of my weaknesses.
You're not even speaking Japanese. Just read the letters.
Hey, apparently reading is one of my weaknesses too.
That's true. Yeah.
But no, he worked
And
on
math.
the Simpsons arcade.
And spelling.
The Simpsons arcade?
Yeah, which has a great soundtrack, often regarded as one of the best beat 'em up soundtracks. Mischief Makers, Guardian Heroes. I mean, almost every single Treasure game he's worked on.
Well, the Konami connection makes sense because Treasure was founded by ex-Konami.
Bangayo's in there?
Yeah. Say Wario World for GameCube, which also in Smash, it's his music in Smash for the Wario's track, which is pretty cool.
That's cool.
Go
Yeah.
to the right a little bit.
Sin and Punishment on the Wii.
Go to the right.
Well, they made that. So, Treasure, yeah.
I just sometimes says if they do specific things.
Yeah.
Treasure sound loop.
Yeah. The actual sound for Treasure is the logo. He worked on that. So it's pretty instrumental gentleman in the development of the sound of Treasure games. So if you enjoy Treasure games, you're going to recognize his work. But this Gunstar Super Heroes soundtrack, it's just remastered for the Game Boy Advance tracks from the original game. There are a few original songs, but not very many. I think there's literally 2 or 3.
I mean, if we're being completely honest, as far as music, it's background noise in this game.
Yeah.
Like, there's shit getting blown up everywhere, and, like, it's kind of just carrying the level. It's not really something you're supposed to sit there and, like, rock out to.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it's one of the weaker portions of the game, honestly, the music. I think the sound's fine. Like, there's tons of explosions. There's variety in the explosions, and the weapons, the sound you're going to hear more than anything is the guns going off, and they all sound, serviceable. But the music, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just kind of there, and it does get lost in the shuffle, in my opinion.
I think one of the best sound effects in this game is like the melee, like the slice you through the air. Like, it sounds powerful, makes you feel like a badass.
And it's cool on the Game Boy. And obviously, the Game Boy Advance is notorious for its limited sound design, but didn't really sound tinny. Again, we were playing on a Retron. I didn't get that infamous 10 audio sound out of it. It's just, there's nothing really, in my opinion, music-wise, that's 100% memorable or stands out. Like, I wouldn't put this on my Spotify playlist, quite frankly.
I think a lot of the times with music, even if it's not memorable on its own, you remember it if there's moments in the game that hit, and like there isn't really memorable moments in this game. I mean, it sounds stupid to say, but like this isn't a game where you're gonna play through the story and like a boss is gonna be like, oh man, like I didn't see that coming, or oh, that was a really cool villain. They're just kind of like surface level. So a lot of the moments where you're fighting bosses, it wasn't like Green. It was like, oh, Green betrayed us, and I'm like, I didn't have any emotional tie. So like, this is just another boss fight to me. And so whatever his boss fight music was, it's like it's not enough an emotional trigger for me to remember that in that moment for later. Even if the music was bad, like you'd remember it if it was bad. Be like, oh, remember that boss fight with Green? Like it was a good fight. But the music sucked. I don't know. I can't remember. I just remember the constant laser noises of me holding that button down.
Right.
The sound effects I feel like are the most strong in terms of sound, where you've got the wall jumping, and each little jump has a noise from the wall jumping, and it was really satisfying on the puzzle level with the bubbles. It took me a second to
That was good.
say that one. Bubble level. Where you had to like bounce off of the walls and like hit bubbles and stuff, and just the tick 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 when you go up, it was like, oh, that's a nice noise.
Oh, yeah, bouncing back from wall to wall was pretty slick. Yeah.
So there's little moments in it, but the problem is it was so much it would get overwhelming. So I feel like there was a lot of moments where I think we were fighting Smash again, and he's dropping those bombs, and Or maybe the ones where the bombs are coming down and if you let it hit the floor, it destroys the floor.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like there were supposed to be sound cues for when the bombs would come down to be like, okay, here it comes. But it was lost with the rest of the stuff happening because like Smash is also like flying around in a jetpack and you're shooting the gun and the music's playing and these tiny little bombs are coming down and I have to like visually try and keep track on them because like they just got lost everywhere. And then like everything else is happening so I can barely see the bombs and then you forget that the bombs are coming down but they're also blowed up and there's like afterburn of fire still on the ground from the bomb that you didn't realize came down because I couldn't see it and I couldn't hear it. So the sound effects were good when there were moments to hear them, but there's a lot of moments where you couldn't hear them because there was just so much more going on.
On top of all that, everything's 220 miles an hour. So,
Yeah.
like, I don't even know if there was a great song you can remember it because it's like, on to the next scene, on to the next boss, the level's transforming. Oh shit, I'm getting shot at, and I'm dodging. Like, it's just so much information overload almost thrown at you. Like, your music's going to be the last thing you're thinking about when you're, like, taking in a level, you know? There's not, you're going to sit there and, like, it's not atmospheric because you're just like, oh, the whole time you're playing. So, like...
Even during transitions between levels where their characters are talking to each other, yeah, there's music playing in the background, but we didn't play this game that long ago. There's nothing that comes to mind because literally 10 seconds later, you're just going to hear...
Granted, the cutscenes in between, you just hit the start button and skipped them.
Yeah, you know.
So you didn't have the full effect of...
Damn, you skipped him, dog?
Most of them.
Yeah. So I don't... They're honestly, like, the ones that we did sit through, they weren't very long.
No.
It would be a couple lines of dialogue and then it would move on to the next moment. And so there may have been more moments where they could have made the cutscenes a slightly longer with some dialogue or maybe like...
Locked behind the hard difficulty.
Maybe some more cool information about, like, how, you know, what if the character... You got to hear what their thoughts were. So, like, maybe some more quiet moments in between just gun, that you could hear the music. But even though we skipped through a bunch of them, there was the ones that we didn't skip through were already so short.
Right. Unfortunately, all that stuff's locked behind hard. So, I mean...
Is it, though? Because even in, like, we played the first, like, 2 levels on hard, and it was, like, the same dialogue.
Yeah, much the same.
We found an extra room.
With a different character also.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the first level, so maybe, but that's just what I'm not going to go through and play on hard. Y'all
I don't
know
have the
well,
time
too.
for that.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, I know it's not going to add that much difference to it where it's like, oh my God, you really are Luke Skywalker's nephew. Like, holy shit. It's not going to be anything revolutionary like that. But, yeah.
Did you see the hard levels are voiced?
Yeah, some of them.
Did you watch any videos about the voice? If they were dubbed over or voiced over good?
No.
Sad.
I know. I just wanted to, yeah. Look, man, we found out you could pick up health like what three quarters through the game. All right.
When we being like, what are these little orbs and what do we do? And we couldn't figure out how to pick them up.
Yeah.
What was the other thing that we figured out?
To fill up the meter, the bar. The green one.
Oh, that each bar was for each weapon.
Yeah. That was
True.
The game became so much easier after we figured that out. Yeah, there's nothing inherently wrong with the music. I think Barry, you said it best. To me, music's always a supplemental thing. It can add so much, and there's not a lot of meat on the bone for the story or the characters I'm not emotionally attached to. Even the themes, I'm like, okay, cool, great, I'm ready to shoot. I play these kind of games for the gameplay, the loop, the fun, and I think music is kind of a backseat for this. Sound design is perfectly fine, though. I think it's great. Now for what you guys are here for.
This is a quick episode.
It is.
Woof.
Quick game, quick episode, fast game. I gotta go fast, bro. Collectibility. So in my opinion, this is a typical treasure game. It's going to review great. Everyone's going to be like, yeah, it's a really good game. It's going to sell like dog shit. It's a recipe for an expensive game, especially from a beloved developer. And this game sold so poorly.
Wait, sorry, is Treasure still making games? Did you mention that?
They're not. I think they're around. I don't think they're defunct though. Really?
They're not around anymore. There's no way.
I couldn't remember if you had mentioned that in the beginning, if they were defunct or if someone acquired them.
Let's look. I think they're still around, man.
As Treasure?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they're still around.
What?
What's the last game they made?
2014.
They haven't done anything in 10 years.
That's why I thought they canceled games. But, like, how are they fucking still around?
Yeah, it says, although they haven't seen a new game in development, they're still alive and well. I mean, they're just going to keep porting Nicaragua to, you know.
Apparently in 2022, they said they're working on a highly desired game.
Interesting. Maybe Metal Jesus Effect will get a new Sin and Punishment.
There are less than 10 people working at Treasure currently.
Woo!
So
Spongy.
technically they're still around, but, like, come on. Like, I thought, I heard shit from free. I was like, oh, they gotta be gone. Like,
2011 interview says that Treasure now uses middleware to develop games, no longer using custom programming.
Interesting.
Also putting an increased focus on re-releasing their backlog catalog as downloadable games on Virtual Console, PlayStation Network, and Xbox Live.
Interesting.
so
So for the 30th anniversary, they announced it's working on a highly requested game. Is Gunstar Super Heroes... I'm sorry, you'll probably get into it in a second.
Oh, you're good. Go ahead.
Is Gunstar Super Heroes available on a digital platform since the 361 shut down? Is it still on the Xbox store?
Negative. So that was the original Gunstar Heroes. Gunstar Super Heroes is only available on the GameBoy Advance. You gotta pay to play, baby.
Okay. I must have misunderstood that.
No, you're good.
You guys were talking about it.
We were comparing a lot initially. But honestly, it's the perfect storm for a super expensive game, right? You have a beloved developer, 70,000 units sold, which is pure dog shit. I mean, that's worse than, like, what's that shitty horror game you had, Nate?
Which one?
Yeah. The one we played.
No, I think Rural Rose still had less.
It was like under 10,000, bro.
Oh my God. Jesus Lord.
It was, I remember it was 0.01 million.
Oh my God.
That's in tenths, right?
Okay, so never mind.
So it'd be 10,000?
That's pure dog shit. So this is just,
10,000 to 20,000 is the high estimation.
Okay.
Yeah.
holy fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, 70,000 is still not a lot, especially for the Game Boy Advance, which, sold buku. The console was super successful, and this was towards the end of its life cycle. I mean, this is literally the perfect recipe for an expensive game, right? Interesting enough, this game's fairly affordable for what that, all that merit to it. It's fairly affordable. Loose cart, you're looking around $40. Actually, at the con we went to last year, I ended up selling one for $30. That's why you guys should come see us, But one thing to be aware of for loose carts for this game, I do see knockoffs quite a bit for this game. I don't know if it's because of the scarcity or what, but I have seen quite a few knockoffs. Complete in box, it's going to cost you around $70 to $80, which, I mean, come on, man. For everything we just talked about, we've been over this 100 times. Cardboard box, handheld, that's pretty solid in my opinion. And then honestly, like, my copy was sealed. As if you watch your TikTok, I ripped that bad boy open. But usually it's like $100 for a sealed copy. I was able to get mine for, I think it was $65. I'm talking, this was last year, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, maybe 5. I'm horrible with time, but not that long ago, like recent memory. So with that information, so with the scarcity of the game, how it didn't sell, it's treasure, it's the only way you can play it. What do you guys think? What do you think about this one? Is it worth it? Nate, what are your thoughts?
For me personally, this is like one of the easiest ones we've ever done. I mean, we're talking, if you got a Sega connection, a Konami connection, a Treasure connection, like, this is a game that's super high regarded. It's platform exclusive. Any boxed Game Boy game at this point, we're talking under $100. We're like, oh, okay. Let alone all the one this one has going for it. And we're talking the price of a PS5, Xbox One, Switch game. Like, that just feels like the most obvious. Why would you not go ahead and just spend a little bit extra money to get the whole box? Like, it's crazy to me that this is this cheap. And I know, like, when I purchased this game, it was going for a little more. I paid $65 for mine complete, and it was around $110 at the time, which this was a while. This is during the epidemic of not only around the world, but of game prices just going absolutely insane. But this seems like one of the easiest ones we've ever done, honestly, maybe personally. It's just like a 100% worth it for me. That being said, I have sentimental attachment tied to this series, and I'm a Sega fanboy, but I think if you take that out of it, we're talking $70. I think this game has potential to, like, be a little more. I think Barry kind of hit something on the head. It's interesting. This game's a super fun game to watch. People, like, some popular streamer or something decided to go through this. It's like catch on like wildfire, dude.
Yeah.
So I think this is, like, honestly, this might be the easiest one ever for you to say absolutely yeah. Like, this is so worth it. $70 is nothing for a complete in-box Game Boy Advance exclusive.
Right.
Like, come on, what are we doing?
And with only 10 people working at Treasure, like, who knows if we're going to see this again in any other capacity.
It's interesting that they're still around. I just for sure they were gone. That's like so shocking to me.
Barry, what do you think?
I think regardless of what this game is, take out Gunstar Heroes, it's going to get an automatic yes. So I think this point is moot. It's a Game Boy Advance game complete in box for under $80. I don't even think it matters.
Yeah, with very few exceptions. Yeah,
I mean,
like if it's not like a sports game or like,
I'm quite frankly shocked this game doesn't cost more. Like, the thing is going for it. It's, sold less from a beloved developer. It's a sequel to a game.
What I find funny is like while you were, I was looking up more about Treasure because of the confusion of like, why they haven't been making anything. And I can't remember if you'd mentioned this, but it was from a bunch of former Konami people.
Yep.
And I was reading that a big reason that they left Konami is because they were tired of the Konami reliance on sequels. And so I find this game very curious because it's a sequel, but it's a remake, but it's not a remake, but it's not a sequel.
I could be wrong on this, but I think Sin and Punishment and this are the only games that have sequels for Treasure.
No, you're correct.
Well, whatever else they're working on it's not going to be original because it's a highly desired game. So it's interesting that a company that didn't really want to do sequels put out a sequel and then was surprised it didn't sell well.
Right.
None of their games sell great, quite
but it
frankly.
Reviewed well.
Typical Treasure.
Has like a cult following.
Yeah, it's very confusing. To me, this isn't really a game that like I would care to buy. If you're just trying to fill a Game Boy Advance collection, like sure, it's one of the cheaper complete in box ones you're gonna get. If you like side scroller shooters, it's one of the cheaper ones you're gonna get. The only reason I would see this going up in price is if they released any new Gunstar Heroes. But this isn't a game I feel like is going to be on the Nintendo Switch Online. I don't see it being one. I could see it being one that comes out in like a anniversary collection, maybe
like a treasure collection,
maybe sometime like
that's
Midway.
What they're
gonna go down to Midway at this point. Yeah, they're just gonna because it sounds like I appreciate the fact that they're trying to re-release, and port old stuff, but it's also funny because they wanted to make original games and now everyone just is going to be re-releasing and reporting and
they're
check our next episode out on it. So I don't know. This is aside from the history of the game about just the game plays really well. It's a really well made game. It does have slowdown, does everything. It's the only way you could play it. So, honestly, it's the only way you can play it, and it's a cardboard box game. It's always going to get a yes. So I'm trying to, pull myself out of that.
I guess to me, it's this ain't even your cup of tea at all. I wouldn't say you hate these type of games. They're not your type of game. And, I feel like this is actually seem like you had a decent time with it even. You know what I mean?
I mean, if we're going to talk from a personal stance, no, this game isn't worth it. I would spend $80 on something else.
Sure, but even then, this is a very good game, and I'm shocked it's this cheap. When I was doing research for the episode, I was like, "There's no way this is this cheap now."
And to be fair, it has dropped, but even back then, when it was at its high, it's still very reasonable. I mean, you compare to what's the Contra Game Boy Advance game that's expensive as shit, and it's okay, let's talk about the same thing. It didn't sell great. It's from a more known franchise. Is probably why it cost more, but it's not exclusive. They've ported it. There's newer versions of it because they made DS Contra, they made, Switch Contra. This is the only way you can play it, and it's still affordable.
It's really stupid, but this is one of those games that, it has all of the makings to be more expensive, and it just needs that trigger. Yep. And that trigger is going to be some YouTuber.
Yep.
So...
Hey guys,
help us, Metal Jesus. Your only hope.
It plays well. Yeah, make sure you pay to win on Metal Jesus' Patreon, I guess.
Why do you think I picked this game, bro? I just sold another copy. I got another one. Let's go. Funding the podcast for the rest of the year.
For your nice $40. Congratulations.
I cracked open the WATA 11, though. Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a good game. It reviewed well. It plays well. It's only available on Game Boy Advance. It's not digital anywhere unless you emulate it. And handheld, cardboard box notorious, hard to get it for. So it has all of the makings of like it sold well. Oh, no, it didn't sell well. It reviewed really well, and it sold like doo-doo.
Mm-hmm.
So it has the makings of being like one of those games that could be more expensive. And I think Gunstar Heroes has a cult following of people who enjoy that game, but it's not in a broader sense of people like Contra as a name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I 100% agree, yeah.
Gunstar Heroes is like, I think the first Gunstar Heroes is, how much is that game?
Expensive.
Okay. So I think when people hear Gunstar Heroes, they think of that one. They think of the Genesis. I don't feel like the common knowledge is there is a sequel, but not a sequel, but it's a remake, but not a remake.
Honestly, a lot of people don't know this game exists.
That's what
if you look
I
at the
mean.
IGN video when they premiered it, it's got like 300 views on it, or 300,000 or 3,000 views, and it's like 15 years old.
Because like, and it's even in the name too. It's Gunstar Heroes and then Gunstar Super Heroes. And like when you hear Gunstar Heroes, or even if you heard Gunstar Super Heroes, you're probably going to type in Gunstar Heroes.
Right.
It's like 150 to 180 hours completing box.
That's not horrible. Well, yeah, that's not horrible.
For a common game though.
You don't find that game anymore. So with the cult following of Gunstar Heroes, I think it's just going to take one incredibly viewed YouTuber to play this game and be like, wow, this game's really good. You guys should buy it. And then it's just going to go up in price.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it's going to be. It's going to be one person who has a platform to reach all of these collectors who got to grab shit up before they go out. So, I mean, if you want to go off of that and get one while it's cheap, sure. It's always like a risk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say like, oh, buy low. And I'm going to speculate that someone's going to have this up on a YouTube video in 3 months. Like, I don't know. Maybe some person's going to hear this podcast and be like, oh, I'm going to do a video on Gunstar Heroes. I don't know. Like, the probability of that happening is so low because, like, I don't know, podcasts and YouTube doesn't mix very often. But there is the possibility of that, especially with people who have a platform who are more, I don't want to say the word bias because that's not right, but they're more prone to like games of this style. It could pop up, but I think this is a one that's gonna, it's at a good price now. It's not going to go up if it goes on a digital service, but if it does go up on a digital service and then some YouTuber does something, people are going to want to buy the game, or someone makes a video about it, someone's going to want the game. I think that's the only thing that's going to make this go up in price.
Yeah, it's such a niche.
I mean, it survived the
game.
2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, it went up a
You
little
know?
bit.
Well, even look at sealed copies, man. Like sealed copies, I think honestly, it's a super viable option if you're going to buy this game, just to get everything nice and minty and fresh. What's the difference? It's like $20, $19 more to get a sealed copy.
Every cart's like a $20 jump to complete, and complete's like a $20 jump to sealed.
Yeah, it's nothing.
But you never see that.
No,
Yeah.
It's just going to take one person with a platform to say it's cool and it's fun and it plays nice to
unique.
like, yeah, and it's unique, like Bryan said earlier in this podcast, or how it was fun and unique.
Yeah.
It's going to take one person with that platform to get a whole bunch of people interested in it, and it just kind of inflate it for I don't know how long. It could inflate it permanently because that happens. You know, we saw that with
Sin and Punishment, another treasure game.
no, we saw that recently with
Phantom Dust.
no Armored Core.
Oh yeah.
When the achievement inflation is a very different thing, because like that is definitely not something that you're gonna know it's gonna happen, but that the second you hear the news, you're like, here it comes. People doing YouTube videos on weird obscure games and calling them hidden gems, we don't really know that schedule unless you pay for it. So so in my opinion, I think like if Game Boy Advance is like one of your favorite consoles, I think this is a good one. It's not mine. There's other games I'd rather buy for it. I think the art in it is really cool,
Yeah.
but I'm just trying not to say yes on everything because it's in a cardboard box handheld, and
I hear you.
you know, like
I mean, I did throw us an underhand toss for the very first episode of 2024, I feel like. But honestly, in my opinion, I was kind of reluctant to chase this game down because I knew of the omissions. So if you're coming from a Gunstar fan, I think you should totally pick up this game. I think you should totally play this game. It does enough to separate itself from the original game. And yeah, there are elements where it feels like it's a reimagining, if you will. But I think it's more than worth your time. Again, this is the only way you can play it. It has everything going for it. Why it's a yes for me. Again, I'm not your financial advisor, but I agree with 100% with everything you just said, Barry. It just takes one guy in his mom's basement to make this game skyrocket.
If this game was available right now on a digital platform, I would say no. I think the only thing doing it for me with this right now is the fact that it is only playable in this format currently. And like, if we want to talk about a collectability sake, like that is a prime example of collecting things that aren't available in other spaces, and that's it.
It checks all my boxes, throwback, to every reason why I would say yes.
I think if you're a run and gun game fan, this is a good one to have in your collection. Like, I think you kind of hinted at it, Barry. Like, that's not a cheap type of game to collect for, no doubt.
It's true.
If you're a GameBoy Advance collector, it's an exclusive and it's affordable exclusive. A little bit of backbone and some like fandom behind it. So I think even if you're just like, oh, I want to collect games like to play for fun, I think this is an extremely viable option at that option. Even if you're not looking to like make money off it, just have a fun game to play. This feels worth it to me.
Yeah, if you want to play this game, like absolutely buy a cart. Like I said, I sold my cart copy for $30. You can still find them out there. But I do think from a collectability standpoint, if you want the box and stuff, new sealed is a 100% viable option, which is extremely rare in my opinion. But for this game, why not? So what do you guys think? Let us know on our social media or in Discord. Thank you for listening. Hey, what's next, Barry?
Our next episode is, as I already said, we're going to be talking about remakes and remasters and if they're a good idea or if they have just crippled the gaming market.
This will be a good one.
Surprise, I have some opinions.
Yes, I think we all do. That should be a fun one.
I'm curious to see all of our opinions on this one. I'm actually really looking forward to this one.
So, and this is going to be an interesting episode for people who are of a certain age. This is coming from a group of people who were born in the 90s, so if you're any younger than that and you didn't grow up with some of this stuff, it's probably going to hit you a little bit different. So
you hear us geezers in our opinions.
Yeah, as old millennials.
Buddy duddies, bro.
Yeah, we're a bunch of old millennials. If you're a Gen Z collector, like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Sorry in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Remakes and remasters from the perspective of the next generation of boomers, I guess.
Boomer shooter?
Boomer shooter? Don't you guys love those boomer shooters?
I actually really do.
Yeah.
Same, bro.
Yep.
That was my era.
Represent.
Y'all don't know about Duke Nukem 3D, Quake, Doom. The classics. Thank you guys, honestly, for listening. We had a lot of growth last year, and I expect no different. We do appreciate that. The fact that I get to spend time, having a blast with my friends, my favorite hobby, my favorite people on the planet, and other people enjoy it out there, it still boggles my mind. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit us up for suggestions, too. We had a couple last year that we got to cover. We can always make those work for you guys. It is fun to hear suggestions. So thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Just don't suggest a game that costs $1,000, because I ain't got that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I got kidneys.
That's true. I don't need both of them. Depends.
Snatcher it is.
That'll be your guys' kidneys. You guys can share kidneys between the two since you're twins.
I think interchangeable parts, bro. We good. We can AK.
Yeah, I'm alright.
I'm going to take a shot at my bearded dragon's blood and grow it back. We'll be good. Bye.
Gamers!
Stay oppressed, y'all. Stay oppressed.
Stay oppressed.